Alright, so I think it was something like... Oh, hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. More like Scarlet Witch and the Motherhood of Sadness. Right? Yeah, I probably deserve that. Directed by Sam Raimi, the latest entry into the seemingly never-ending saga of the MCU sees Dr. Stephen Strange trying to protect America Chavez, a girl with the ability to traverse the multiverse from the Scarlet Witch, who's trying to steal her abilities so she can be in a universe with her children. Now, this is an entry that did what not many MCU movies have managed to do since Endgame. It actually had me interested to go see it. Aside from No Way Home, because I will always go see a Spider-Man movie in theaters.
I fought an alien too. On Earth and in space.
Oh.
Yeah, he was purple.
I want to fight an alien.
I've been largely uninterested in Phase 4 of the MCU, but when you tell me you're going to incorporate horror and Sam Raimi as a director, well, now you have my attention. Now, did it deliver? Let's talk about that. Right away, this film does come with one pretty big caveat, which is also just an issue I've had with the MCU in general. So the MCU, it just seems to be telling like this one big overarching story, so it's almost like you're forced to sit down and watch a bunch of other movies and television series in this universe to understand where our characters are at. And right in that same vein, Multiverse of Madness just makes a lot more sense if you've seen WandaVision. And for a casual fan like myself, I heard Wanda talking about her kids, and I was completely lost right from the beginning of this movie. But personal gripes about the MCU aside, let's get into what worked and what didn't. And the first thing I'll say working in this movie's favor is just that for the tone and the atmosphere they were looking for, they simply could not have picked a better director than Sam Raimi. A man that, as we all know, is well established in the horror genre with the Evil Dead series, but also a man who's responsible for the greatest Spider-Man trilogy ever made. Yeah, I said it.
Gonna cry?
I feel like I could also put Sam Raimi into a mixed feelings category as well, because while there were elements of Raimi all over this film, with like the fantastical visual styles, the different camera angles, the horror elements, and of course, that Bruce Campbell cameo, a part of me really wishes that they would have played even more into his strengths. Because while I do think he was given more freedom than a lot of directors are within the MCU, I also feel like this movie could have been even more enjoyable if it was just like 90% Sam Raimi. Instead, it feels like a little more of maybe a 60-40 split between him and Marvel Studios. It feels a little watered down at moments where if this was just a Sam Raimi film, he probably would have gone balls to the wall crazy. And while we're living in a time with all these director cuts of movies, I would love to see a Raimi cut of Multiverse of Madness and just see everything that he wanted to put in there and what it could have been. Although I will say, what we did get as far as horror elements, I really enjoyed. Like after the first half hour of this movie that feels very typical MCU, this is almost a straight horror film. There are multiple legitimate creepy moments throughout this movie, with my personal favorite probably being when Wanda is chasing America and Strange and Christine through the tunnels, looking just like a straight serial killer. You know, I'm one of those people that tend to think a lot of MCU properties feel very samey and kind of like they stick to a basic formula.
Boring!
But the horror aspects in this particular entry just give it an identity of its own. It gives it its own personality. And it's something different. It's dark in both its subject matter and its tone. It's not afraid to show blood and death, as the Scarlet Witch spends half of this movie just covered in blood. And it's just a refreshing change of pace, especially for somebody like me, who's kind of been losing interest in Phase 4 of Marvel. And that'll walk me right into my next positive, which is the Scarlet Witch. Elizabeth Olsen turned in a fucking amazing performance in this, and she was easily the best part of the movie.
You break the rules and become a hero. I do it, I become the enemy. It doesn't seem fair.
Like to the point where this wasn't Strange's movie, this was Wanda's movie. She was just brutal and absolutely terrifying throughout. But at the same time, I think it was a great choice to have her motivation be her children. Because even when she's at her absolute worst in this movie, which ironically is when I love her the most, you can still sympathize with her character. And as somebody who frequently sides with the bad guy over the good, I loved everything about her in this film. I might even say that she has instantly shot up right near the top of my MCU villains. And then my final positive as far as this film goes, I just absolutely loved all of the effects and the magic fighting sequences. To absolutely nobody's surprise, the special effects in this movie are truly incredible, just adding that much more to the experience. And a few of my favorite moments from the entire movie are during these sequences, with the first being Wanda arriving at the Sorcerer's Temple and just absolutely obliterating it. And then the main highlight for me was that musical note fight between the two versions of Strange. It was just so creative and original, and it was also something that feels 100% Raimi influenced. Now, the Illuminati is something I'm a little bit mixed on. And also, spoiler warning ahead, stop watching this video if you haven't seen the movie yet. Or just, skip like a minute. Anyways, I have to preface this by saying, as a huge fan of both The Office and A Quiet Place, I am a big fan of John Krasinski, and I was absolutely geeking when I saw him as Reed Richards. It's a casting that fans have been asking for so long, and I think he absolutely delivered. For the 5 minutes he was on screen. Now, I understand that they wanted to demonstrate just how powerful the Scarlet Witch was, but I don't know how I feel about being introduced to all these characters, most notably John Krasinski as Reed Richards, and of course our Patrick Stewart cameo, only to have them all taken away from us a few minutes after meeting them. And will people please stop killing Professor X? God damn it, all this guy does is die. Cut to Professor X death scenes.
Hello, man.
Also, isn't Reed Richards supposed to be like one of the smartest humans in the entire multiverse? So why did he immediately reveal Black Adam's powers so that Wanda could use that information against them? I understand that they were all underestimating her, but that still seems like a really dumb move. It's no wonder Strange had to do what he did in their universe. There's no way that team was beating Thanos. Oh, and also, Captain Carter fully deserved what happened to her after that awful "I can do this all day" line. Man, did that feel forced. As far as my negatives go, I already talked about most of my biggest issues, which are WandaVision is pretty much required viewing for this movie to make sense. If, like me, the last time you saw Wanda was during Endgame, you're gonna be confused at the beginning of this. Next, Sam Raimi did a fantastic job letting people know he directed this film. It's just stylized, it's a little bit campy. He brings some of his Evil Dead roots and his horror elements the further this movie went along. But I still wish they would have given him just complete creative control to make whatever he wanted to make. If there was ever an MCU movie that I would have loved to see with an R rating, this is probably the one. A negative that I was genuinely surprised by is a lot of the humor really didn't land here for me. Despite all of my issues with the MCU, humor is usually something that they nail, even to a point where I think sometimes they add too much humor during serious moments. Whereas in Multiverse of Madness, I don't know if I had a single laugh out loud moment, aside from Bruce Campbell's cameo, of course. And I know you could make the argument that they weren't really going for laughs in this film as it is more focused on horror, but there still were a lot of jokes in the script. My biggest issue, however, is something that started with No Way Home. And that's that we're starting to open this world into a multiverse. And while I'm sure diehard Marvel fans are more excited than ever for what the future holds, for casuals like me, it's almost like we're going down this path that I just don't know if I can follow.
We're going down a path I can't follow.
Personally, I've just always preferred superhero movies that tell their own self-contained story, that aren't part of a larger universe. That's probably a big reason that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films and the Batman from earlier this year work so well for me. And also, while other people might 100% disagree with this point, like they might go in the complete other direction, I feel like now that we have a multiverse with multiple versions of all these characters, I feel like these films just aren't as high stakes as they once were. Like if somebody dies, we can just go visit another version of them in another universe. There's just something about that doesn't quite sit right with me. But overall, I have to give props when they're due. Multiverse of Madness did something new. It did something different and outside of the MCU comfort zone with its horror tone and atmosphere. The effects and the fights were great. Wanda was absolutely terrifying. And there was just a lot more good than bad in this film. Without Sam Raimi, I would probably give this like a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. But with Raimi's great visual stylings and different camera angles, his horror elements, and just his overall direction, this is gonna get a solid 7 out of 10. But that's gonna do it for my review on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Please let me know down in the comments what your thoughts were on the latest entry of the wide, wide world in the MCU. Did you absolutely love this take of an MCU movie with more of the horror elements? Did you find it to be pretty underwhelming after seeing No Way Home? Or are you like me where it falls somewhere kind of in the middle, maybe slightly above average? And while I have you, me and a couple friends record a weekly pop culture podcast called Culture Shocked. Link for that will be down in the description. And we actually just recorded an episode about Multiverse of Madness. Not exactly sure when we're set to release it yet, but please give us a follow, a rate, and review anywhere you find your podcasts. And pretty soon we will have that Multiverse episode available for you to listen to. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, leaving a comment, and subscribing right over here, as it helps the channel immensely. And if you want to see other movie reviews, rankings, tier lists, stuff like that, you can check all that out right over here. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.